The theme for today is thinking about the long game because being a business owner is just that. It's a marathon. It's not for the faint of heart. It's definitely not a win every day type of feeling that you're choosing to do for your profession and your way to provide for yourself and your family. So thinking through that, the the way I wanted to start the framework and also get your feedback to let me know how to kind of tailor this for you as well is that I really boil the life cycle of a business down into 6 phases. And it's also a cycle that can come with different ideas. And if you're an entrepreneur or a creative person, you probably have lots of ideas like I do. And my challenge is often figuring out prioritization and follow through. So depending on where you're at, I view the spark as like you get an idea, you have something in the back of your head, something maybe you've been sitting with for a while, but there's something brewing that's speaking to you, and you want to figure out what to do with it. I consider building that you've taken that idea and you've started to put it out there. You're speaking to it, you're acting on it. Maybe you're building a product, you have a website, you're taking clients. So you're kind of in this secondary phase of getting the wheels going. If you're growing, you've got a couple years under your belt, you've tested, you've got some sales, you've got clients, you've got some traction, things are feeling good, you're trying to figure out what to do. Maybe you got to quit your job, maybe you got to make some moves, but you're at this really integral point that I often call shit or get off the pot. I call that like the growing phase. And then after you grow, and maybe somewhere along the lines, you've experienced the stress phase. I mean, stress is without a doubt a daily occurrence as a self-employed business owner, but I specifically have experienced stress for extended periods of time, and it's often felt like a pretty integral phase in my business life cycle. And that brings me to the reckoning, where something's not working or something has to change, and something in you knows that you're stuck and you need to make a move, but you need to take that time to figure out what that is. And then you revise. You've learned, you've grown, you've checked in on certain things, and you now are ready to figure out how to move forward. So given those kind of 6 categories, I would love for you to think about where you're at, and maybe you're in a hybrid of two, but feel free to add that into the chat to share and put out there like where you think you're at in this life cycle of being a business owner. So while you're doing that, I'll just kind of share a little bit more about my background and my businesses. So in 2012, I founded a knitwear brand called Third Piece. And at the time, I was working in finance, and I finished grad school, and I really just knew that the corporate world was not a world I wanted to play in. I wanted to control my own destiny. I wanted to control my effort, my performance. There was just a patriarchy about corporate life that did not speak to me. And I ventured out very unknowingly, a very eager entrepreneur. And I kept my full-time job for 3 years. You know, I really did it as a passion project for a few years. And then it was over the course of testing, trying, learning that I started to just continue to refine what it was that I wanted out of the business. But I say that was over the course of a decade for me. So in sharing this, maybe there's some elements of some of my aha moments and my takeaways that could maybe help you move through things a little bit quicker than I did. But where I'm at now is I'm starting my second business, which is called Interweave. And I've been able to take the knowledge and the failures and the lessons from Third Piece and move it into this next phase. Just to kind of share a little bit. So Third Piece was a knitwear. I designed knitwear collections. I started out as a wholesale business. I had a roster of really amazing retailers that picked up the line within the first few years. Really ventured into the world of like product and manufacturing for the first 5 years, thinking about designing collections, producing yarn, and then selling it through first wholesale channels. And then I went pop-ups, which is when I met Allison. I eventually went full retail with a brick and mortar, a flagship brick and mortar location in the South End. And in the background was always an e-commerce website that was running. And after the course of 10 years, I had built something, and it was something that was visible. And I had a store, and I had a team, and I had a product line, and we had been acknowledged by some really great stores and celebrities, and on the surface, it all um, looked really great. And in my ego, I think it also looked and felt really great. But underneath, it wasn't working, and it really wasn't viable, and it wasn't something that was building me up and helping me fulfill whatever it is I was looking to get out of this business. Granted, the pandemic did a real number on all of us that had customer or retail centered businesses. But the change in that and the need to adapt, I closed my store, which was a really big undertaking. And that pause I had to take in the midst of it is what allowed me to figure out the steps to move forward and how to move past being in that constant state of stress and challenge and working like you're always pushing the rock up a hill. It was that time period that allowed me to reassess, figure out the difficult decisions I had to make, and move forward. And I am really grateful that I get to speak to you now, kind of coming out of that. And now that I'm back in that spark and building phase, that there is paths out of it if you're in it. And it is a loop. It's a loop that moves, and you have to know how to move it. And you have that energy, and only you have that energy in you to figure out where you're at in that cycle and figure out how to move forward. So just real quick, Kristen, any questions or anything kind of coming in on the chat?
Not so far.
Okay, cool. So in the midst of all of this, essentially what was happening was I was outgrowing the version of myself that I was when I started the business. I started my business when I was in my late 20s, newly married, just out of graduate school, working corporate. A decade went by, and I was a completely different person. I was a completely different woman. I had become a mother, and the identity that I had when I started my business was significantly different than the person that I had become. And I boiled that down into three categories that kind of help me and hopefully can help you think about what this evolution of yourself as a person, and as a founder, what it can look like and what it should look like. You have your skills, and those are the things that you're good at and why you started your business or the value you think you can provide. But the skills you have when you get started are not the ones you need to keep the cycle moving. So that's where you have to do a lot of learning. You have to do what you're doing right now, sitting in on workshops and talking to people that are doing it or have done it. You have to hire people. You have to hire people with expertise or knowledge that you often don't know. Maybe it's technical, maybe it's just something that's completely unfamiliar to you. And then you need support. You need people around you that can advise you, a network of folks that you can reach out to. And so much of business is just about your network and the people that can hopefully open doors for you and connect you and just be your cheerleaders at the end of the day, because that's what got me through when I was in my toughest times, was just someone sharing a photo of their hat or just acknowledging something that they had made. So it's the little blips of support that you get that are the motion, the gas in all of it that helps you move. So you always kind of have to be thinking about that bucket and seeing where you sit in it. And then you have your values, that when you start out, you have hopes and dreams, and those things, they evolve. Over time, your life changes. You have different people in your life, you have different employees, different team members. And then there's also like the societal, like what's changing and what's happening. When I love the trend of 2016 going around, because it feels like such a nostalgic, like happy, like I go back and I was like, oh, I would give anything to go back to 2016. I'm not gonna lie. But there's a beauty that comes with the evolution and an awareness that's nice to have if you stop and kind of take the time to think about what's important to me now that's different than what was important to me then. Like, what is it that I want out of this business, whether it's income, security, a strategy to sell it and build wealth, whatever your kind of takeaway is of what you want from your business, it's going to change. And that's where you really have to take some time to think about where you stand in place of like your own community and your own neighborhood and your belief system. Like all of those things start to frame you as a person, but they deeply impact your business because as a founder, those things really go hand in hand, as they should. As someone that spent a lot of time feeling disconnected from my business, it was very much related to me making decisions or taking action that wasn't really rooted in my own value system. And maybe I had taken the advice of someone, or I read something, or I was influenced in a way that wasn't aligned with my values, but I didn't know, so I did it anyway. I did a lot of that. And then the last bucket is meaning. And I say that from just like a sense of fulfillment, because at the end of the day, when you are sacrificing your time, your money, your career, and your efforts, what you're doing should feel good. And it should feel like it makes sense. It should feel like it financially makes sense. And it should feel aligned. There should be a sense of joy that comes from your business. And I will share that I did not have that joy for the better part of the last 5 years of my business. And I just sat in it and I struggled through it. And I really just kind of didn't know how to kickstart my way into figuring out what was going to be the catalyst to make a change. So growth is growth is it's necessary. I think that there's a level of comfort that comes with it. But it made me think about strategy. I think a lot of business owners, you're like, well, I got to do this. I should think about Facebook marketing ads, or someone told me I should look into this. And you're always inundated with ideas and opinions and thoughts and just noise. And I think a takeaway I would love for you to just remember is that like most businesses don't need a new strategy. They just need the leader and the person in charge to know where they are today and where they want to go. Like that's the starting point. If you don't have the roadmap of what it is that's important to you and like what you're doing and why you're doing it, all of the decisions of do I do ads, do I do email, do I do pop-ups, all of that will just be compiling on top of band-aid after band-aid. And it's just really important to take the time, especially like with the start of the new year. It feels like a really nice time to do some reflection and think about that from a very honest perspective. So when you think about what that means and trying to find clarity, I think, clarity is something that you create. It's not like all of a sudden one day you're like, oh, this is all like going as planned. It's a combination of really digging deep and doing work to figure out what is that path and what is the why that I'm really kind of searching for in this work that I've chosen to do. And I have 3 recommendations and just also examples of practices that I do to help me kind of think through clarity. And it's something you have to do repetitively. It's not like, just because it's January, you do it. I keep little practices in my notebook, and it's something I try to do probably more on a monthly basis just to check in. And I will say that when I was in my stress phases, I wasn't doing a lot of this. I was just moving, like, gotta move, gotta go, gotta do this event, gotta do this trade show. I got invited to this. I gotta go do this. I was just very much in a reactionary state where I was taking any opportunity that was thrown my way without doing a lot of reflection on if it made sense or not. So 3 ways to think about it is you have to stop at periods throughout your day, week, or month, and just really start spending time in your head. And if you're working from a place of urgency and you're always operating from a place of like hustle and constant motion without a sense of ease, that's a sign to you that like something's missing, that there's a little bit of misalignment, and you got to check it before it gets ahead of you. And the way to think about that is just to sit with like, it's not where I should be, it's where I am now. And I'll share that, like, for me, I always had this very grand vision of what I wanted to build, and I wanted to create multiple stores, and I wanted to build out the product line, and I was always in this very cloudy, fantasy-like vision, but it made me be unsettled with where I was actually at. And it always created this disconnect of not finding a sense of harmony or a sense of comfort with where I was. I was just never content. And I always felt like I needed to be somewhere else. I was always behind, or I was always in a place of reaction rather than a sense of being in control and being empowered. And there's a few ways to start to think about that. And the first thing to do is just to assess your energy and like really take a look, like, how are you getting up in the morning? How are you showing up for yourself? How do you feel in your body? Like, are you taking care of yourself? Are you prioritizing your health? Are you maintaining relationship? How are your relationships? How do those kind of softer, um, the things that are just so simple, but they're so easy to not prioritize. And that for me was the red flag. I had worked myself to the point where I ended up in the hospital, and I was neglecting my body. I had chronic pain. My financial house was just a mess. I just was really at a point when I was in the stress phase for over 5 years that I was in way over my head, but I wasn't honest with it. I just kept wanting to keep going. I kept thinking, if I try one more thing, if I do one more thing, this is going to be the answer, or this is going to be the thing that gets me out of this hump. But it just kind of kept adding up. And it wasn't until I had my second daughter that it really forced me to say, nope, this is not working. Like, it's just not working. And yes, I've put $500,000 into this business. And yes, I've given it 12 years of my life, but it's just not working. And I will say that aha moment took 5 years, an honest struggle of 5 years. And it had to come from me. I had a lot of people and advisors and lawyers and folks say that, you should shut this down. And my ego just was not there. And I had to get to this season in life where it wasn't about me anymore. I had children. I had now had a second baby, and like I just couldn't keep putting my body and myself through this cycle of like hoping that like the next holiday season was going to be it for me. And so it was just listening to my body, trying to connect all of the things that I was experiencing, and just having like a very honest talk with myself, that helped me work through what clarity looked like. And it took a year. Like I will throw out that like this for me wasn't something that happened in a vacuum. I worked with mindset coach. I've worked with folks to help me work through this, and it's been a whole process in thinking about the mental and energetic components of what it takes to be a founder and what it takes to create a business and a path that feels aligned with you, works for you, and makes sense. And the whole component of it was something that once I got there, everything else started to dissipate. Like the stress started to come, like one by one, all of the problems and all of the bills and all of the noise that I had slowly started to chip away. And it really was this kind of like inflection point for me. It was in May of 2024. It was about almost a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, where I just hit this reckoning and I said, I can't live like, I just can't do this anymore. And then from there, you just start acting in a way, and you make those revisions, and you have the difficult conversations, and you have a sense of honesty with where you're at that feels quite freeing and eliminates any shame. For me, I had a lot of shame associated with the way my business ended, and I associated it with a lot of failure. So it was a lot of mental work and thinking about how to revisit what my future was going to look like and what that was going to look like for me. So the theme there was that, this wasn't something I just discovered. It was something that I actually took a lot of time, a lot of self-directed and guidance from others to think about what that next phase was going to look like and what that clarity was going to need. So that killed my half an hour kind of workshop. So I've done a lot of talking, and I just want to create a little bit of engagement with folks. And what I want to do in kind of just sharing my story and my experience and where I'm at now is I want you to think about where you're at and use the next few minutes, and maybe you take a piece of paper, or if you want to share it, I want to invite you to think about what it is in your life and or your business that's giving you energy and what is taking it. Because for me, that was the thing I wished I had known earlier. I wished I had known how to check in on myself energetically to be able to make decisions that were going to get me to where I wanted to go faster. But instead, I often would dwell or sit in a very like low vibration, low energy state, and I would feel very stuck and I would get stagnant. And for me, that's why that period, it took 5 years. And even the reckoning and steps to revising, that took me a year. Like it took me a long time. So the first thing to do is to do a little check-in. And I'm going to invite you all to do that. And just think about life and or business, because they are one and the same in terms of, you know, how you're giving your full battery to your day to day. So with that, I'll stop. And also, Allison, I happy to check in with you and just kind of see
Yeah.
where any of that is landing from your own
Uh,
perspective.
I like added a stream of consciousness in the chat because so much of what you just shared resonated. And I'm glad you touched on failure because I think that's a big part of what we have to navigate as founders. Like, how do you define failure? How do you come to terms with the fact that you can learn so much more from failure than from when things go really smoothly? Uh, and how do you recover quickly? You know, how do you make sure that you can pivot or reinvent or revise, to use your word, your business, your team, your revenue model, whatever it may be. Um, and I think for me, what hit home the most is that it's really hard to find time to separate, find calm, still hours in any given day or week or month, really, to sit down and be honest with yourself about what things are looking like right now, what you want things to look like, and how you get from point A to point B. Um, and everyone is really different in terms of what type of support system they respond best to. I don't work well alone. I'm a solo founder, but I don't work well alone. And I found that out very early on. So bringing in thought partners and support systems and advisors and all of the people that you touched on is really critical for me. But you still have to spend time alone. You still have to really drop into yourself. And I'd love to hear like more about how you do that. But anyway, that's a lot of what resonated, um, as well as the fact that you will go through some version of this cycle so many times over, and the end result may not be closing your business or transitioning into something new. It just may be a different version of that business or a different version
Totally.
of your day to day.
That's where the revise, it could be small or little. You know, your revision could be just a simple tweak, or just you know, a vacation. It could just be something as simple as like an acknowledgement, or it could be I'm gonna burn down the house and I'm gonna start over. So it could really range. And I think that's where the cool thing is that, like, it's you, right? It's your business, it's your life, and there's something so empowering. And I have to say, anyone that has the guts to start their own business, whether you're a freelancer or you're on a mission to, you know, start the next Apple, you know, like, I think there's something so empowering about taking ownership of your career. But at the same time, it's a mental game. It is a 95% mental game, and that until you do the work to think about how to best manage your energy and your mindset, the rest of the pieces all come into place. And I did not know that. I honestly did not know that up until about a year ago. So for me, it was a decade long journey of, you know, just playing a like a very expensive game of I swear a lot sometimes, but so like fuck around and find out. It was definitely just a lot of trial and error and swinging for the fences. And, I ate a lot of bad mistakes and I had to learn a lot of lessons the hard way. I don't regret any of it. I look back on it with a sense of appreciation. There's a lot of stuff I wouldn't do again. There's a lot of stuff I often now am able to advise folks not to do. But we are all here, and I believe we're all here, and we have a specific path and a journey. And there's things that speak to us as individuals, and there's things that influence the things that we feel called to do. And it's our job as humans to nurture and listen to that and to create the awareness within ourselves and then go out into the world and offer those. And I firmly believe that if you're an entrepreneur, if you've chosen this path, that you're answering a calling that you feel inside of you for some reason. At least that's what I tell myself. Like, why am I doing, like, why the hell am I doing this? Like, why did I choose? It was so much easier when I worked in finance and I could just collect a paycheck and I could just, sit back and take 2 weeks vacation. It was so much easier, but I hated it. I hated it. And something about it just didn't sit with me.
Yeah, entrepreneurs are not choosing the path because it's easy or quick. It's because this is what you feel you were meant to do and you want to create something new in the world. Um, does anyone want to chime in and talk about what's giving or taking their energy right now or have questions for Kristen?
I just want to call out a question that came through the chat, and it was from Smita, and she asks, how do you balance ambition with contentment in the present moment? It's a struggle for her.
That, I think, as an entrepreneur, the ambition is what drives you. And for me, ambition often looks like having lots of ideas, always having lots of projects in the works or thoughts or things that I want to do or that I want to accomplish. So I'm always tracking that. Like when I speak to the calling, like that ambition, it's coming from somewhere. And now that I've been doing this for over 12, 13 years, like I go back and I have ideas that literally I had back in 2015 that I either tested or tried or something that are now the catalyst for my business now. So when it comes to ambition or a calling or a sense of an idea, always acknowledge it, always track it, and listen if it keeps coming back. Like if an idea or a thought or something keeps coming back into your mind, or you hear a song, you see a person, something reminds you of like, oh, I have this idea. Like track that. Like be in tune with what you're feeling and what your thoughts are tracking. The thing I've had to struggle with is like, it's not going to happen now. Like I would love for it to happen now or in the next 6 months, but for me, I had to get very real on timing. And the whole theme of this is that like it's a long game, right? Like I would love to be able to like launch a series of retreats and think about maybe what another space could look like. I would love to do those things. But right now, I have 2 little kids. I am coming out of a battered relationship with my first business. I don't want responsibilities. I don't want the overhead and the ownership of a team. Like I'm in a very like minimal life right now and I like it. So for right now, that's where I'm at. So it's just an honesty with where I'm at and what I can handle right now. But I don't lose sight of the things that appeal to me, that speak to me, and the ideas that I have because I do believe that if they're meant to be, they're going to keep coming back. And I get bursts of energy. Like all of a sudden, I will wake up one day and I'll be like, oh, I have this idea. And then I will go and I will spend time playing with it. And then maybe I shelf it and then maybe I go back. Or maybe it prompts me to like pick up a conversation with someone or revisit a coffee date. I do that a lot with Allison. We do a lot of like coffee date tags where like I want to throw something by someone and it's getting the wheels in motion when it feels ready. And that's where I do believe that there's a sense of divine timing in your own journey that you can also speed up or slow down, but you have to be the catalyst and you have to be the one managing it.
Jen Ginty has a question. Jen, if you want to unmute.
Hi there. So here's my problem, which I do believe is probably 90% of entrepreneurs' problem, which is the constant need to say to myself, what's next? What do I do next? That I ended that. Now it's time to do this. And just, yesterday, a full page article in an industry book came out about me and my product, Moody. And I sat there for about 10 minutes and I was celebrating. And then immediately it came to, well, what's next? Who do I have to reach out now and get another article written? What am I doing right now in this moment to keep this momentum going? Without allowing myself to seriously sit down and say, okay, this is a win. And, let's celebrate that and take a little time for that. And like I said, I think most entrepreneurs, especially in early phases, are always like that. And for me, that's content creation. And it burnt out. It burnt out so fast that I ended up going on to ChatGPT and was like, I need a, some sort of calendar that's not going to burn me out. And basically, ChatGPT said to me, whoa, 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 you're doing too much. So I think that that's really hard for a lot of us to sit back and maybe enjoy a little bit of it.
Yeah, no, you touch on a really great point, which is the celebratory phase. I also think that as um, women and females, there's a lot of hats that we play oftentimes in our lives, so we don't have that privilege of being able to slow down and tend to ourselves and take time to acknowledge ourselves because we're so busy often in a role where we might be caring or responsible or just sh- sharing the burden of what's happening in the space of others. So I think acknowledging the need to celebrate is so important. I personally still struggle with this because I need to do this, I got to be doing this, the constant state of like forward movement, that is something you have to consciously acknowledge and work to manage. And I think what you said is just that. You stopped yourself and you said, it's only been a day, right? Like the article just came out yesterday. So you're putting this imaginary timeline pressure on yourself to act with a sense of urgency instead of working with a sense of clarity. Where instead, if you just said, fuck yeah, like this is awesome, like this is like so big, I'm gonna take this moment and I'm gonna have a glass of champagne, I'm gonna celebrate with a friend or a loved one, or I just wanna like text it to my friends and family. And then allow yourself to like feel like a big part of energy work is sitting in the feeling. And we don't like to sit in discomfort. We want to fight our way out of it. But there's something about sitting in a state of celebration that is so rare. And when I tell you that if you were to take a 1 to 5 day breather and just sit in a state of like appreciation and gratitude and celebration, that will do more for your mental health and your long term game than anything else would. I promise you that, like, if you could just learn to say, I hear you. We should be doing something. We're going to do something. But right now, we're going to sit in celebration. We're going to talk to a friend. We're going to share it. And I think once you work through that step, it hopefully should make the next phase feel just as celebratory because you don't have anything to prove, right? Like you don't have to like put it on social media to brag and boast. Like you want to put it onto social media because you're celebrating, because you truly are acknowledging the work that you've done, the place that you're at. And it's important to share that with others because why the hell, like, we're not doing this in a vacuum and no one's going to be your cheerleader but you. So I think kind of, reframing the anxiety that comes with what's next is, I mean, I say this because I've worked with someone that literally like has helped me program my mental thought patterns, and that is such a key one as a founder and as just a person trying to do so. And then like an ambitious person, you always want to be like moving forward. But that's awesome, and you should be so proud and take time to just sit in that proudness and don't feel like you have to do anything with it because in theory, you don't, but you get
Thank
to.
you. Yeah, it's like I feel like we, especially as women, need to hear permission from someone to do that.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. Permission's such a big like I I still struggle with that. I always feel like I need someone's like permission or validation to do the things that I want to do. And then eventually you sit back and then you're like, I don't need to check in with anyone, right? Like I really don't need anyone's like stamp of approval in order for me to do the things that I want to do. Whereas the
Yeah.
opposite, this is where I feel like I don't want to get into like a genderized role, but there is something about the state of the world that we live in and living in a very masculine dominated world where we're forced to play by these rules that are not really feminine rules that like we're forced to be in a state of like go 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 and do until you're told not to, or like men never ask for permission, they just go until they're told not to, right? Like that's a prime example of the world that we live in right now. It's a take, move, power driven world where they move until they are told not to. And we oftentimes, or if you're in the opposite energetic aura, like you're waiting, you know, you're kind of sitting by waiting for your chance to take a swing. And I think that like it's important to know the game of how business is played and know how you want to play it by your own terms and your own standards, and to use your energy and to use your mindset to like get you there, because that's the catalyst. You are your own worst enemy, and everything sits in your head, and the only way out of it is just taking the time to like depatternize yourself from the standards we've been given.
And I think this is a great segue to the question that Alex put in the chat, which I'm going to read. It's a little bit long, but gives great context. She said, I feel I've been struggling basically for the past year now, and I think maybe it's a combination of burnout and uncertainty. It is really hard to continuously stay positive and motivated when I'm truly scraping by. I'm definitely in the reckoning/revision phase, and I'm having a hard time seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. I kind of miss my initial spark and ambition when I first started my business. How do I find that again?
Mm. Step away. Step away is kind of the first thing, even if it's just for a small amount of time. I think just taking um for me, I'm going to speak from my own perspective, because when everything you wrote, I was nodding my head, because that was so me. I was in a state of reckoning for such an extended period of time that my nervous system was so shot. I had a complete breakdown in my health, in my body, in my mental mindset, that I just was operating from a sense of survival and fear. And nothing, I will tell you, nothing can be created from that state of survival and fear. You can only create, and you can only build, and you can only get that spark from a place of empowerment and a place of just stability. So your nervous system, when you're constantly fighting, is always telling you that like something's going to fail, the other shoe is going to drop. um, this may not work out. What if this doesn't work out? The doubts and the fear creep in so quickly. And that is just a spiral down that path. And the only way to break it is to do a pattern interruption. And the easiest way to do a pattern interruption is to step away and to think about what even a half a day, and thinking about how you frame your week. And I would encourage you to be honest with yourself with how you're showing up for yourself. You know, are you drinking water? Are you taking care of yourself? Are you going for walks? Are you calling a friend? Are you connecting with others? Like, think of it on a very simplistic level. Like, you don't need to go out and join a group. You don't need to like hire anybody. You don't need like to do anything where you feel like maybe get a book. I love self-help books, but I think that like it's super simple. And when I find I'm going down that negative path, which it happened, like I feel like the last month for me, I've reverted backwards. And I just checked in and I'm like, I'm eating like crap. I'm not working out. I haven't talked to anyone. I'm being a hermit. And, you know, I'm not even drinking water. Like, I am my own worst enemy right now. So start simple. It doesn't have to be grand. You don't have to search externally for someone to like solve it or answer it for you, because like the first thing is to take care of yourself, and naturally the rest will follow. I will tell you that the sparks will come when you're most relaxed. The ideas will flow. For me, it's often in the shower, like when I go for walks, you know, they come when you're in a place of a stable and secure nervous system. So the goal for you is to get back to that point where you are prioritizing yourself.
I won't speak for Alex, but I love that answer. It's so true. And it's so hard, but
It's so hard.
it's absolutely true.
I mean, and then everyone's life has different layers of complexity. We're all, you know, dealing with like, speaking for myself, I have two kids, and um, I struggle. For me, motherhood is my biggest struggle. I would work on my business all day long. And then when I think about the role and the hat I have to switch into in order to be a mother, I sometimes just struggle with it, like having that skill set or that level of like patience and practice within myself that I have for my business. So I do a lot of work to like remember that at the end of the day, if you don't fill your root, if you don't fill your first bucket of your own health, your own house, your own relationships, nothing else in the tree can grow. Like nothing else is going to flourish if you haven't done the baseline to work on your health, your home, and a healthy place to operate from.
We have a couple more questions. Ashley said, I've noticed a lot of talk about burnout and the great exit where women are leaving the workforce, juggling the mental demand in all aspects of their lives, work, home, kids, etc. How are you able to make the decision to step back knowing it will have a large financial impact on your household?
That's a great point. And I will say I made my move in my early 20s before I had children. And I think my answer might be different today. And again, it all depends on what season of life you're in. The key to making it work is to only move in a direction that makes sense across the board. If you are going to take a step or a hit financially without some understanding or acknowledgement of the need of the sacrifice and the need for a lifestyle change, or if you're not someone that's not aware of the lifestyle change that comes with that decision, then that is a situation where I would really encourage you to assess if this is the right move for you. I will say that my life when I had my full-time job versus within a year of leaving it, it changed dramatically. I was in for a very rude awakening in terms of the things I was buying, the clothes I was wearing, where I was going, the vacations I was taking. I lived a pretty cush life in my 20s, and then in my 30s, like chewed me up and spit me out. I ended up selling all my designer handbags, and I ended up, parting ways with a lot of the things I had acquired. I ended up having to sell my 401k. I ended up putting myself in a financial situation that at the time I believed in, and I full and wholeheartedly thought that this was the solution to grow my business. So I was willing to sacrifice and take some of the things that I had invested and saved and acquired and put it into my business. But there's a very honest conversation you need to have with your level of risk, with your lifestyle, and what changes you're willing to make. And I think any entrepreneur that does not do that is going to set themselves up for failure.
We're getting some really great comments in the chat here. Jill is chiming in about having that untouchable time on your calendar, blocking off something for you, for whether it's creative fulfillment or family time or whatever it may be, something that you put clear boundaries around. Um, and Alex is talking about how growth from the outside can look really different from how it feels as an entrepreneur, and maybe simplifying is the answer. And I do think that building a model for your business that is actually much simpler than its current state is so much harder than it looks. And what do you strip away and how do you focus? That is just something that we really need that calm time away to think through.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm trying to see how I could be most helpful in thinking through time management because everyone's schedule is different, right? Um, in terms of frequency, I would say if you're not giving yourself 4 hours a week to prioritize, and here's the thing, you can multitask this stuff, right? Like you can take your walk and you can take a call on your walk, or you can take a coffee break. And I think, sometimes it might be in smaller time blocks that might be for 2 to 4 hours at a time. I work very seasonally. I like to think that, the winter is a time to slow down and it is a time to rest and to recuperate and to kind of sit in this very low vibrational state and kind of just be and sit in the being. It's very uncomfortable. I hate January. I'm struggling tremendously, I will say. But that's part of it. It's just sitting in this uncomfortable state. But to me, it's knowing that like it's going to be like the spring will be here soon. It's going to be here soon. And that this is the time to kind of sit, plan, think, rest. And then when you move into the spring, also using that time to think like, I don't like planning more than 1 to 3 months out, just because of how much can change. I think there's usually for me a 6 to 12 month plan that I always have in both in my head and on paper. But it's a quarterly game for me to think about maintaining the strategic mindset you need as a founder. And then I break it down into weekly blocks where, I want to get my nails done. I haven't had my hair cut. I want to make sure I go for walks a couple times a week. I want to listen to a podcast. Like, it shows up in different forms. And it's not like I need to lock myself down with a pen and paper or a whiteboard. Those are awesome too. But I think it's just thinking about what is the time when you can remove yourself from the distractions and use it, because that's when the ideas come. They come when you least expect it. And that's when just having, your notepad or like your notes app handy. I just keep a notes app of all my ideas. It's a bit spastic. If anyone ever saw it, they would think I was psychotic. But I think just like, but I think
My
like,
handwriting is illegible even to myself sometimes. So I hear you.
but I think, that's where the sparks there in, especially if you've been in a state of survival for a long time and you're in a very dysregulated state, the sparks are little to start, they're small. And for me, when I was shutting down my business, nothing was working. Like my knitwear collection, putting me in bankruptcy, like, like carrying yarn lines, like working with mills, dreadful. Like nothing of it, like both operationally and financially, like it was just an uphill battle with different areas of my business that I had been doing for so long. And at that point, it just become habitual and also just necessary because I had signed contracts and I was in deals and I had inventory and I just had obligations. So there was a sense of routine that was very just necessary to fulfill my obligations. But the things that would light me up, I kept going back to were, there's something about experiences, right? There's something about this need for people to come together. People may not need to buy yarn, or they might not need to buy an expensive sweater, but I do believe that like people need to be in the community in presence of others. People need to learn how to manage their pathways that like help tap into their energetic systems. Think about like creativity and even just this, like using mindfulness and practices that allow people to learn about themselves better, approach how they treat and regulate themselves. And that in turn only positively impacts how they show up for their family, their friends, and the community at large. And I think that speaks to also where we're at today. I think that more people need to learn how to show up for themselves. More people need to learn how to be more human. And collectively, the more people that can learn to do that, I think this is what's giving me hope. The more people that can learn to do that, the better off we will be, because we have to become lighter. We have to become more compassionate as a collective society. And it is the individuals that will bring it together. It's the only way. And that that's kind of
Kristen, will you take just a minute or two to tell us about Interweave? Because I'm not sure that everyone knows where you're heading next.
Absolutely. So a year ago, I started my second company called Interweave. And this is where I've really landed taking all of the lessons and things that I had learned in third piece. And for me, I took all the sparks. I kind of took all the takeaways and the things that I was landing on and were speaking to me. And I designed knitwear collections. I had done the whole product role. But where I also saw the world going and where I wanted my world to go was I wanted to be more in service. I wanted to reduce the side of consumption, especially the side of consumption within my business, of kind of just making for the sake of making or adhering to a fashion calendar or an inventory standard that was setting me up for failure. I wanted to move from a place of product into a place of service. And through third piece, I started teaching, along with an amazing team of teachers, I started teaching and offering knitting classes. And throughout the pandemic, the silver lining of it all was this tranche of people interested in knitting and crafting. And the takeaway, the thing that people kept coming back to and sharing with me was how knitting had helped them, healed them, gotten them through a specific point in time. That had never crossed my mind when I started rolling out knitting. It was more of a reaction of people bought a knit kit from me and then they needed help. And so it was more of a customer service angle. But the takeaway that I kept listening to with customers was how powerful sitting down with a ball of yarn was for their mindset, and how for the first time they were able to not have a lot of thoughts and to like not be on their phone and to not be thinking about whatever they might have been thinking about before they sat down. So I had this very aha moment with the takeaway being about an experience, about an offering, and a way to show up for people that allows them to tap into creativity, because I think as adults we're not allowed that. Again, we need permission to take time to do a craft or to do a yoga class or to do something. And then on top of that, I personally have just been a student of yoga for over 20 years. And over the years, I've combined knitting and yoga into workshops, both at my store and different fundraisers and different components. I've done these unique kind of experiential things in my retail space. And for me, it's not a one size fits all. These are all tools in the toolbox that help us think about how we show up for ourselves and for others. So with Interweave, I offer knitting experiences, knitting workshops, and I'm excited to roll into retreats. I'm hosting my first retreat in Woodstock, Vermont in March, where I will be collaborating with an amazing group of practitioners on the movement side, breath work, mindset, energy work, knitting, and in nature, right? We all need a little moment to be in nature because that's really what brings it all together. So the model is more rooted on experiences this time around for me.
Amazing. Kristen, thank you so much for being here, for sharing your journey with all of us. And I encourage everyone to connect, take root in this call, connect any way that feels good. One-on-one, in a group, in the playground, outside the real world. Follow up with Kristen. Um,
I'll
really
just
grateful
share.
for all of this.
I'll kind of put up I know we did the Q&A, but for anyone, I'm more than happy to connect. I have a little, on my website, I have a little discovery session if anyone ever wants to connect. I really enjoy working with other business owners, regardless of what stage you're at. For me, I've had the pleasure of having amazing mentors and advisors and just peers that I lean on, and that is half the battle. And you know, at the end of the day, it's the support around you and having a sounding board that has gotten me through the toughest time. So, wanted to put it out there that I am on Instagram, LinkedIn, Connect, and I would love to hear about what you're building.